Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Kinda Murdery, a true crime podcast that's mostly about murder, and always about the strange and compelling stories that arise when the path less traveled twists to darkness, and those who walk its shadows surrender to violence and moral corruption. We have a perilous journey ahead, so thank you for lending me your courage and good company. I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this is Kinda Murdery. Welcome everyone on this Sunday evening. This recording is coming to you fresh off the grill in San Diego, California. Sure enough, with this 100-year storm we've been having, there was no skiing for me. A state of emergency has been declared in the Big Bear area. All roads are closed, and I'd like to send my thoughts, prayers, and good energy to the people of the town of Big Bear. I hope you all are hanging in there, staying safe, and staying well. Special shout out to Derek Hayes and his lovely wife Sarah from the Monsters Among Us podcast. I know they reside in the Lake Arrowhead region and have also been crushed by snow, so I hope they're hanging in there and doing well. If any of you haven't checked out Monsters Among Us podcast, do. It is awesome. You will love it. Alright, you have arrived at part 3, the captivating conclusion of The Witch of Vladimirovac, Satanic Pacts, and the impressive kill count of Baba Anjuka. Now notice, I said part 3, so if you haven't heard parts 1 and 2 yet, go back and listen to them. Then, come rejoin us, we'll save you a seat. And if you're all caught up, then I'd like to invite you on this journey. You could almost think of it as an audio version of court TV in the 1920s. It's time to jump right back into the witness testimony at the trial of Baba Anjuka. As always, I'll rewind the story just a bit to let you settle back into the narrative, but if you're ready, I suggest that you put your personal items underneath the seat in front of you, stow your carry-on in the overhead compartment, let go of the worries of the day, but be sure your seatbelt is fastened. There's turbulence expected ahead. Kinda Murderies, The Witch of Vladimirovac, Satanic Pacts, and the impressive kill count of Baba Anjuka, Part 3, starts now. As Baba Anjuka was rushed by a jailer between a cordon of mounted police and into the courthouse, newspaper photographers were awaiting her appearance. She became wild, clasped her hand over her face, and shouted, "Why photograph me? Am I a wonder of the world?" The first witness at trial today was a woman named Maria David, who testified that she'd been a servant of the witch for 20 years. The prosecutor asked, "Did your mistress give away potions for money?" Replied Miss David, "Why yes, of course. Often ladies and gentlemen came in carriages and in cars from Pančevo and Belgrade." David went on to say that the hocus pocus that the witch used with her clients was the reason that she had been called upon to testify. The prosecutor immediately asked Maria about Baba Anjuka's potions. Did Baba prepare magic potions, Miss David, against unwanted childbirth? David replied, "Well, indeed, but they did not help." Those gathered at the proceedings showed obvious relief at this answer. Said Maria David, "The girls and the women came and then cried and complained that they had not been given magic powder but just plain old dust. Baba demanded 100 to 200 dinars for such purchases." On this testimony, the state prosecution also accused Baba Anjuka of fraud. The defendant answered his accusation with a loud curse. Theatrically and with much drama, Commune Mayor Voja Sudin went ahead and told that soon after the death of Nikola Mamarov, there was ample evidence that he was murdered. In the whole region, it was known and said by all that you could buy poison from Baba Anjuka. At these words, Baba Anjuka jumped up and challenged the witness. Now, the witness was a gigantic, sturdy farmer, and the old woman's height was barely up to his chest, but she shoved back the judicial soldiers and screamed, "You're lying, you devil thief!" When the prosecutor asked for the witness's testimony, Baba rushed the court bench in front of the courtroom, grabbed the hands of the presiding judge, and shouted, "Permit him to go to hell!" When the court administered the oath to the witness The witch disturbed the proceedings with constant shouts of, "Go to hell, you devil's brood!" Then the public prosecutor called Dr. Branko Verdelia, who'd carried out the autopsy on the body of the 70-year-old Nikola Mamarov. Dr. Verdelia stated that the old man had been poisoned by arsenic and that the magic potion given him by his granddaughter was nothing more than a strong arsenic solution. The court custodian showed Baba Anjuka a vial that stood in front of the court table and was filled with a milky liquid. He asked, "Did you, Baba Anjuka, sell this bottle to Sofia Mamarov?" Baba Anjuka replied, "I know nothing. Maybe it's the foot medicine I gave to Stana." Said the prosecutor, "You've forgotten everything?" "Oh my God," wailed the old woman. "I hear so poorly, I do not understand what the witnesses say." She took her headscarf off and held her hand to her ear and said over and over again, "It seems to me that I have become deaf." "So far you've heard everything just fine," replied the prosecutor, "but it appears that you cannot hear unpleasant things, things that you don't want to hear." The crowd in the courtroom laughed at this. Later, during a break in the proceedings, a newspaper reporter requested permission to speak to Baba Anjuka in her cell. He showed her drawings and photographs made in the courtroom during her trial. Baba Anjuka looked at the pictures for a long time. Then she moved to the mirror and said, "Am I really that old and ugly? You know, that's only because I have no teeth. The teeth I got in prison are bad, and they do not fit. That dentist was a bastard. But if I had good dentures in my mouth, I would be more beautiful and I could marry again." When asked what she thought about the probable outcome of her trial, Baba Anjuka replied to the question with a sincere wink and said, "I do not believe that I will soon go home. The judges will give me 2 years, although I am quite innocent." She then requested that the reporter please not write anything bad about her. As the trial resumed, it was difficult even for the prosecutor to make sense of things because all of the witnesses and defendants testified against one another and accused each other severely. Anjuka remained joyful and dismissive because she was convinced that, due to her old age, she could only be condemned to a brief sentence. Occasionally she is called to testify, and then she speaks at length or refuses to answer and spews devil's curses. Mamarov's murderous granddaughter, now 18 years old, testifies that the potion she purchased was for her mother's health. And as mentioned at the outset, Maria David, who had worked for Baba Anjuka for 20 years, reiterated that men and women often appeared in elegant cars from Panskova to demand potions for the elderly. Pausing the trial here for a moment, I wanted to bring up something that I mentioned as a strong possibility in episode 1 of this story, which is the likelihood that either Baba Anjuka or her son, or both working together, were in fact using these poisonings not only to extract money for the potions and the murders, but to then blackmail the people to whom they had provided the deadly drafts. You see, in 1929, very, very few people had motor cars, especially elegant motor cars. And the fact that obviously wealthy men and women were driving their fancy automobiles to the witch's hovel themselves instead of sending a servant with a likely story to procure what they needed suggests to me that these powerful people felt compelled to appear in person, and that reeks of blackmail. Okay, back to the trial. The prosecutor indicted only 10 cases, those where peasant women took the poison from Baba Anjuka and confessed that they were trying to get their husbands out of the way. It wasn't only women. There was one peasant man who had poisoned his wife, co-accused with the others. At the original plea hearing, the magistrate had asked the 92-year-old witch whether she pled guilty, and she jumped up and shouted, "I am completely innocent. Everything is a lie. I am 92 years old, and I have experienced many evil things. But such a vulgar complaint as that which this gentleman accuses me of." She turned a withering eye on the prosecutor. "Why, that is absolutely unthinkable." Later on the witness stand, Baba Anjuka told her life story. Now, some of this you've heard before in episode 1 of this story, but it's worth revisiting quickly in the old woman's testimony. She was the daughter of a wealthy Romanian trader, that's trader with a D, not traitor with a T, who settled in Banat. She attended a private school in Pančova in the middle 1800s with children from aristocratic houses, and then lived with her father. When she was 20, she was seduced by an Austrian officer and fell ill with syphilis. At the time, she went completely into solitude and devoted herself to scholarly reading, mainly medical literature. Her father arranged her marriage to a rich peasant named Pistov in Vladimirovac, and their 20-year marriage turned out to be happy. As we mentioned before, 10 of Baba Anjuka's 11 children tragically did not make it to adulthood, and her one son became a wealthy merchant. After her husband died, she turned a wing of her house into a chemical laboratory. When asked her reason for setting up this alchemist's workshop, She replied that it was just for fun. Baba Anjuka had one servant, a single maid, who was mentally disabled and mute. Gee, it's not suspicious at all when your only servant is intellectually impaired and unable to speak. All of this occurred over 40 years before Baba Anjuka's trial, and even then, her reputation as a healer and an herbalist had already spread far and wide. "Mr. President, I've always had a good memory," declared Baba Anjuka cheerfully on the witness stand. "I also know history and the national customs and political events of our region. I am an expert. Everyone knows that." She was almost giddy as she said this, and then suddenly turned angry as the audience laughed, doubting her acumen. "You laugh," she said, "but all the great gentlemen have come to me for advice. Ministers, deputy generals, envoys from the king." Again, although I don't doubt Baba Anjuka's wisdom, to me this also suggests a high probability that Baba Anjuka blackmailed the wealthy and powerful after helping them to commit murders. And on that subject of blackmail, given that she made up to $800-something thousand in today's purchasing power selling her murder, sickness, and apparently ineffective abortion potions, and given that she may very well have been blackmailing the nation's most wealthy and powerful people, not to mention that she carried on her successful poisoning, witch doctoring, and probable blackmailing business for more than half a century, I can't help but wonder what became of all of Baba Anjuka's wealth. Where is the Witch of Vladimirovac's treasure? Was it given to her one surviving child? Is that why he was such a successful merchant? Was it buried somewhere? Who knows? What I do know is that I personally have no interest in searching for the treasure of the Witch of Vladimirovac, as I'm virtually certain, if it does exist, it's cursed, and woe be to them that finds it. For a little additional historical context, it's also worth noting here that for centuries of human history, and in particular, in fact, during the witch hunting and witch trials in the United States of America, it was quite common for a single woman with some education and, more to the point, some property that she controlled on her own, which often in those days meant she was a widow, to be accused of being a witch and burned at the stake because some man wanted to get his hands on her money or property, and just the fact that she was educated and or old and alone, in other words, lived outside of the structure of established society, was more than ample evidence that she was a witch. And although Baba Anjuka's serial murdering poisoner escapades seem to be corroborated by many, many witnesses, I can't help but note that she checks all the standard boxes for an unjustified witch hunt.
Find the witch, may we burn her? Who you know she is a witch? She looks like one.
You'll have to forgive me, but in my humble opinion, there's never a bad time to shoehorn a little classic Monty Python into anything you're doing. And of course, it must be said that in Baba Anjuka's case, she was not falsely accused of being a witch. She was, in fact, explicitly a witch. But witches were legal and licensed by the crown in Yugoslavia at the time. So the question really is, for this explicit witch, was her version of a witch hunt not the accusation of witchery, but rather the fact that she was prosecuted as a murderess when perhaps she was just selling harmless potions, and that prosecution was motivated by somehow wanting to get at her property or wealth. Again, it seems like here the answer is no. Her murders were very well documented and assisted by any number of accomplices. However, again, I couldn't go without noting that she does, in fact, check all those standard boxes for unjustified witch persecution. On July 15th, 1929, the District Court of Pachova reached a verdict in the case of Baba Anjuka, the Witch of Vladimirovac. The 92-year-old woman was sentenced to 15 years in prison for assassinating 70-year-old Nikola Mamarov. The murdered man's 44-year-old wife, Stana Mamarov, was given a life sentence. His son, Lazar Mamarov, was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and his daughter-in-law, 39-year-old Sofia Mamarov, the wife of Lazar, was given 16 years both for participation in abortion as well as the murder of Nikola. As for underage at the time of the murder, but 18 at the time of the trial, Lazar and Sofia's daughter, Olga Sturga, received 8 years in prison as an accomplice to her grandfather's murder. Wow. So either this entire family really hated Grandpa, or some sinister Moriarty wanted to take out the entire Mamarov clan and Baba Anjuka all in one fell swoop. During the sentencing I've just described, dramatic scenes took place. At first, Baba Anjuka listened to the sentencing as though it were nonsensical. Then she slowly began to understand that she'd been sentenced to 15 years in prison. She rushed to the court, arms raised high, and shouted, "But I'm an innocent old woman! Where is the rumble?" Stana Mamarov and the other women despaired of their severe punishment. Crying and struggling, they tried to interrupt the sentence reading. Stana's lawyer attempted to calm his client to no avail. The prosecutor then pointed out that Baba Anjuka would still be held responsible for 6 other poison killings, including the poisoning of the innkeeper Geibel and the attempted poisoning of Mrs. Luba Delikladek, who killed her husband Peter with one of the witch's poison potions, and who Baba Anjuka had tried to eliminate before Delikladek could testify against her. When the verdict against her, 15 years imprisonment, was finished being read, Baba Anjuka did not rail and curse. She seemed calm and resigned, saying simply, "I have only tried to help poor people, have given good advice and valuable medicines, but never poison. The king will know that I am innocent." The various defense attorneys for the convicted and sentenced parties all filed appeals, to no avail. The prosecutor announced that he was reserving the power to try Baba Anjuka for the other 6 murder cases, and that he would be applying for the death penalty in those. News of the verdict against the Witch of Vladimirovac spread like wildfire throughout the country, causing much outrage, especially in Wawodina, the home village of Baba Anjuka. Farmers came from faraway cities to witness the verdict being read, and there was much indignation and fury over the condemnation of Baba Anjuka, who was generally considered by the common people to be a benefactor and person of great wisdom. Baba Anjuka would spend 8 years in prison before being released on compassionate grounds due to her old age. She died in 1938 from senile dementia at 100 years old. And, in the words of the late great Paul Harvey, now you know the rest of the story. Before I let you go, let me quickly remind you, as I usually, often, nearly always do, of the free 3-digit 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week lifeline number 988 that you can call to receive immediate counseling for substance use, mental health, or suicidal thoughts. So please program it into your phone, 988, and if you find yourself in crisis, don't hesitate to call to get the help that you need. And please, always do remember that the world is a better place with you in it. If you'd like to connect with me, you can reach out to me at kindamurdery@gmail.com, at kindamurdery on all social media. I'm here, I care, and I would love to connect with you. And also, again, please do call 888-MURDERY. That's 888-687-3379 or 888-MURDER, the letter Y, and tell me your Kinda Murdery story. Let the strange events from your own life inspire an episode of the show. And with that, I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.